Hey everybody, Michael June here with Game Changers for Government Contractors. Today I have Christine with me. Christine, before we hop in and talk mergers and acquisitions, why don't you give everybody a quick overview of who you are and what you do?
Christine McDannell. I am the founder of the Magnolia firm, which is an M&A business brokerage firm. We work specifically with digital-based businesses, but I'm excited to come on with Michael and kind of make a more broad discussion when it comes to M&A and exiting your company. And I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've built, sold, exited a bunch of businesses in the last 20 years. So excited to help others do the same.
Nice. That's really cool that you've done that. I'm sure this is going to lead into some of those questions about what your experience was as you were doing it. This podcast here was designed to be a little bit about like the future of M&A, maybe some trends, predictions. Not that we have a crystal ball that we can look into, but based on what we're seeing, kind of what's going on. Before we get into that, how did you get into this business of this is your life now?
It's funny. So the very first transaction, I did use a business broker because I was in my 20s and had no clue how to sell a business. Actually, to be honest, I thought you had to use one. I thought you couldn't sell your business on your own. After that, I'm like, wait a minute. I built this business from scratch. I'm an amazing marketer and salesperson. Like, why can't I just sell my own company? Which I ended up doing, right? I'm like, oh, you can. And so that exit went really, really well. I had interviewed 2 brokers beforehand, and the appraisals they gave me were about maybe 60% of what I wanted. And what do you know? I got exactly what I wanted. So I got a very high multiple. A lot of times I hate to say it, but they'll underprice it, just to get the deal done quickly and get their commission check, which is unfortunate. So there's some bad characters out there, not everybody. And so anyways, leading up to in 2021, a couple of my friends were exiting and they said, hey, Christine, we know you've done a lot of your own. Can you help us with ours as a consultant? Which I did. That was October of 2021. And by December of 2021, within a couple months, I closed 5 transactions just in the month of December. I'm like, well, let me officially launch a firm. I was going to do an M&A firm way down the road as like my retirement plan. And so I'm like, well, let me do it now. It's so much fun. I love it. It's really rewarding. I'm literally helping people with the biggest transaction of their life, most of them.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And the more I do what I do, the more I think maybe one day I'll be doing what you do at some point. It's such a great business to be in, and it's very needed. There's a lot of people trying to get out of their business. There's a lot of people trying to get into a business, and they need some really good folks to help them with it. And it's interesting you mentioned that about the pricing. I've noticed that in a lot of businesses, that's the way it is. Like the real estate market, every realtor that I've ever worked with has been like that, where every house that I've ever sold within the first 3 days or before it went on the market. And I'm like, so I was right. We probably should have raised the price, because they were all like, hey, I think this is where it should be. And I'm like, no, I think this is where it should be. And it's happened multiple times to me. And I'm like, yeah, next time I'll change the way I do that. What are some popular trends that you are seeing in M&A right now?
It is still a seller's market, big time, more than ever. And I'll tell you the reason why, but let me say the key word, which is profitable. For a profitable business, it is a seller's market, big time. And the reason being is a lot of people got a taste of freedom during COVID from their corporate job. They got to work from home, be with their families. And then what do you know? Now everybody, you had to go back, and it's just like, what am I doing? Right. And so it's enticing for them to find, and a lot of them are qualified, right? They have, they own their home, they have a well-paying corporate job, so they can easily go get financing, especially SBA loan right now. And, maybe so let's use $1 million for an example. So, they could go buy a business for $1 million, hopefully cash flowing $250K, 25%, again, depending on the industry. And that's $250,000 that could usually replace their corporate salary. And they're only putting 10% down typically with SBA. Sometimes it's up to 20, but because the interest rates are so high right now, I think the SBA is kind of giving that leeway of like, okay, just put 10% down to kind of make up for this interest rate that's sitting around 10 to 11% currently on a 10-year loan. And so you're putting $100K down, and now, you're cash flowing $250 in a year. So it makes a lot of sense, for people to make that jump. Obviously, it's your first business acquisition. About 90% of our clients, this is their situation, which I'm super passionate about. Leaving, jumping ship, getting out of the golden handcuffs. I'm a really big fan of that. That's the trend right now. And, I overhear colleagues are like, oh, the economy's bad and the interest rates are so high and it's really bad right now. I'm like, where are you? I don't know where they're, and again, I think that the media, it's easy to get negative. I don't watch the news. I try to stay completely away from it. And half the time I didn't even know the interest rates were increasing, by half a point or whatever. I didn't even know because not a single buyer mentioned it. Not a single buyer even used it as a negotiation, which I would have. I'd be like, hey, the interest rates are high right now and the price needs to be lower and blah, blah, blah. But nobody's come. Yeah, they don't care because the business is servicing the debt. When you buy a house, you're personally servicing the debt and you're buying less of a house because it's coming out of your pocket with the interest rate.
That's an interesting one. Are you seeing a particular size of business that is in that category of people that are not wanting to go back to the corporate job, or they're just determined to stay away from that? Are they buying $2 million businesses, $10 million businesses? Is it all over the map? What are you seeing in that area?
Great question. So I like to play in the $1 million to $5 million realm because that is a lot of times that's going to be a private buyer, especially the 1 to 3. In the very, very beginning, I was doing smaller transactions, again, for friends or just kind of getting my feet wet. So these were 500,000. These were $500,000. And even one buyer, their home in Seattle had like doubled in value. So they had, $1 million of just equity. So they pulled 500K just out of their house and bought this business. That was so easy for them. And the first time buyers left corporate. So that was exciting. That was very easy for them to do. Yeah. Once you get upwards of 3 million and up, a lot of times those are strategics doing acquisitions. I think in the realm of like 500K to 3 million at most is what I'm seeing right now for a first time business buyer coming out of corporate. Another trend I don't want to forget about. These are some trends I just realized just recently, just had a magazine article in an M&A magazine about the 5 magic words to look for in a business acquisition. After it went live last month, I found 2 more I came up with. So these are the trends and they're all R words. Remote-based businesses are huge right now. Again, like I explained earlier, they want to go back and work from home, be with their families. So that's the big trend. Brick and mortar is not as much as a trend right now. The car washes are not. The laundromats are not. I know everybody's selling courses teaching you that. They are not fun. Things break. And so remote-based revenue growth, you always want an upward trend, right? On a business you're going to acquire. Recurring revenue is massive. The more recurring revenue you have, the better. Relocatable. Again, these are remote based. Some of them have like design based businesses. A lot of times will have like an office with a hybrid model if the team wants to go in. Because design, you're kind of spitballing in person. You're looking at the computer screen at the designs as a collective. So, but again, you can move a lot of times. Maybe you can move the office. Retention's the other R word. Retention of your clients. Retention of your staff, removal of the owner. So if your business is wrapped around yourself and you're working 70 hours a week, you can exit, but there's going to be an earnout. They're going to keep you on for at least 2 years. Like you don't want that. The magic time the sweet spot is about an owner working 15 to 20 hours a week. Then we could get them out of the business pretty quickly because they have management team in place, obviously. Then last one is a repeatable sales process and repeatable systems in general, right? Like you have an operations manual. The processes are repeatable, not just the sales. So those are the 7.
Yeah, those are awesome. Those are spot on things that I would think that people need to be looking for. Something you mentioned about the removal of the owner. We're really big on when it comes to branding, a lot of times talking to people, hey, you need to build the business like you would sell it with the understanding that you probably won't. That's kind of how we talk to a lot of our clients, because a lot of clients get in and they start building it with, oh, we're going to sell this thing for $100 million. I'm like, look, your business is doing 2 million in revenue. Like it's not going to happen if we don't get 100 million, then we're not, we're just going to keep it forever, right? We're just going to let this thing ride. Build it like you would sell it, but understand you might not. And with that comes the personal branding side of things. And this is a lot of times where you see an owner who's really good at sales, really good at marketing, and you start to peel back the business and they know everyone. If they were to have an actual Rolodex, but if you were looking at their contacts in their phone, right, it's probably in the thousands versus teens or hundreds, right? They just know everybody. So when it comes to removal of an owner and you have an owner who's got a booming social media account, a booming LinkedIn account, a booming YouTube page, and that's drawing a lot of the business in. How do you handle that? Is that something that you're like, oh, this is going to be the thing that breaks the company? Or is there a way to transition those eyeballs to that new owner? I know this is slightly off the topic, but still, like I could see this as a challenge for somebody that's like, man, that business is booming, but if Mike steps out, I think it's going to die. So what do I do?
I have two quick examples of my own. And then, I'll talk about how we do this with our clients. Cause you're right. Some of them are the face of the company still. So we have to try to strip them out of there as it's listed simultaneously. So for me, my very first business was a house cleaning company, residential San Diego. And again, I was in my 20s. I didn't know any different. I was bootstrapped like you wouldn't believe. I think I had like tons of credit card debt and I had like $300 to buy vacuum cleaner and have two women come clean with me. They didn't speak English. I didn't speak Spanish. Obviously, I learned it very quickly. It was called Christine's Cleaning Service. Is that going to be easy to sell? Probably not. So within 2 years, I changed it to Cleanology, which was, kind of started stripping my way out and put managers, over the years. I had it for 5 years before I exited. Put managers in place. Christine's not there anymore. It's not called Christine's Cleaning. I'm not the face because I was the face. Even my dog was like the little mascot of the company. We took me and the dog off all the marketing. And then the other story is my wellness spa. It was called Eco Chateau from day one. And again, I've already exited businesses. I knew from day one, like I'm going to eventually exit. Do not be the face in the beginning because people buy from people. So I was working the front desk. I was in a lot of marketing. Okay. I kind of nurtured the business in the first couple of years. But what's so funny on that story is the husband and wife that bought the business in 2017, because I still go in there, right? Like once a month. And I'm in the little brochure still. And it says like founder story. And technically I am the founder. But it's like my picture and, founder stories. Again, I've been in this entrepreneurship game for 20 years. I like eat, sleep, breathe business, read everything. I could get pretty creative. So one of our clients was face on the website. I'm like, Jen, your face, all over the website. It's one thing to be on the team page. It's not one thing to be on the homepage. Take it off. She wrote a book and I've published books. I'm like, Jen, this is how we're going to pitch it. Like leave the book. But we're going to say, hey, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, we're going to do a revised version of the book and we're going to put you as co-author. That's like an easy hack. And that gives them immediate credibility. So it's just like a new, second edition of that book. You push it out. That's like a really good hack. For people listening in the beginning, I think it's important to be the face of the company. You're doing all the sales. Let me talk about sales. First off, we all know the owner is going to sell better than anybody in the company. It is a known fact across the board. I've never seen it done differently. So that's a hat we don't want to give up because sales do kind of decrease if we stop selling. But towards the end, you just have to put a biz dev person in place because again, you're going to get stuck where they're like, oh, well, Michael did all the sales. He has the one-on-one relationships with all the big clients. How are we going to take over? You got to start giving your employees more of that.
That makes sense. And for a lot of the government contractors that we work with, the owner, founder, or multiple, co-owners, they're still very heavily involved in that. I think a concern for a lot of people is, so what if Jim leaves? What if Susan leaves? How are we going to bridge that gap? I've even seen it in nonprofits where you have somebody who leaves and then all that knowledge walks out the door because it was the person who started it and they go off into retirement or whatever. And it wreaks a lot of havoc. One trend that I'm seeing, that I'm curious if you're seeing, and talking about the dollar value you're talking, you may not see this a whole lot, but in government, what I've seen a lot of over the last 4 or 5 years is these private equity firms coming in and buying companies. So I used to see the one-on-one. It was always a one-on-one type thing. And now I'm seeing the split, like the giant split where you're talking about. Probably it's under 3 million, maybe 5 million and below. And then a lot of the things above that, we're seeing a lot of private equity firms coming in to buy things. And it's different than when a one-on-one buyer buys it. It's quite a bit different. So I was wondering if you're seeing that trend as well on your side. And if you are, what are some key differences between those two types of sales?
We did an $18 million just like a month or two ago. It went within 4 months. It wasn't PE. It was actually a guy doing a roll-up of phone apps. That one, sold within 4 months to an individual that was doing a roll-up. We're just now working with private equity. The reason I've purposely stayed away is they are strictly financial buyers. They only care about the numbers. But for our listings, these are A++ listings. I'm pushing for higher than average multiples, like high. And a PE group is never going to pay that much, right? So we're building more, not just on the numbers, but all these intangibles, because a business is worth what someone's going to pay for it. Like everybody knows that. Right. But with PE, they got these spreadsheets and they got, the numbers don't work.
That's all they care about. Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes sense, right? So now we are going to, we just started this initiative last month We're actually going to work on buy side also. So we're approaching all these PE firms. We're getting their mandates. We're not charging them a fee up front, but then we're going to go source these off market businesses, bring it to them to take a look. And we get a success fee if the deal closes. They are kind of holding back right now. The biggest year ever was 2021. All these businesses were freaking out and they just like scooped so many of them up, and they're doing like HVAC roll-ups and all this fun stuff. Now they're kind of, they're laying a little low because they want to see what happens to the economy, right? Because the economy is still pretty, I know that again, the news is saying it's crappy, but I mean, unemployment is 3.4%. That's super low. So all these metrics that actually are fine. I don't know. Again, I'm an optimist across the board. So yeah, that's the trend I see. So I think they're laying low right now. They're waiting, but it's nobody's got a crystal ball, right?
We're in that favorite time every 4 years where there's a presidential election. And, nobody wants to do anything. And it doesn't make any sense, but they don't do it. And it's the companies that do something during this time that usually benefit, because people are so scared that they're like, hey, I don't know when I'm gonna get another buyer. So yeah, we'll drop the price, or yeah, we'll accept that offer. So the people that are willing to actually make some moves during this quiet period, because it's about a 6-8 month period, maybe 9 months sometimes, that we see on this side, where it's leading up to the election and they don't know what's going on. Then after the election is over, then there's like, 2, 3, 4 months where they're like, what's that person going to do in office? And how's it going to affect things? And then, you just gradually get back into the swing of things. And that's why I always tell people, like, from a business perspective, I hate presidential election years, just for that reason, because people just seize up and it doesn't matter. You could literally have anybody as a candidate and everybody's like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm just going to wait. So that's always an interesting one that we see. I know you haven't done a lot with the government side of things, but I'm curious if you have any input on this one around some challenges that are unique to government versus commercial M&A that you may be able to talk about.
I mean, off the top of my head, I actually have some positives, right? It's super hard to get your foot in the door with the government and stuff.
Yeah.
So once you do, so that's huge, because that sales cycle or that amount of time to get the contract can be really long. Once you're in, right? Unless you just mess stuff up. So a buyer is going to love that, right? Because they're going to shortcut it versus them starting on their own. So I think that's a plus. I don't, off the top of my head, again, I haven't worked with them directly, so I couldn't speak much more on it, but I'd actually love to hear kind of your thoughts or what you've seen.
I think the challenge for most people in the government space of it is, if they've not been in government, then it's like speaking a whole new language. They understand the language of business, but what you can apply versus what you can't is very different. So one of the first jobs I ever had, I was acquired within 6 months. So I went to work with this big company. We were acquired by another big company. And then 6 months later, we were sold off as a tiny division to a very small company. And that very small company knew about the government. They were excited about the market, but no one on the team understood it. And so when I would sit with the CEO and say, you can't do that, right? You can't call up somebody and act that way or say this thing. You're going to get us in trouble and they're going to lose their job, or somebody's going to go to jail, right? You can't do the things that you're used to doing because they're not allowed in this market. That was a huge leap for them. And it took them probably a solid 12 to 18 months to actually learn how to speak the language. That was the hardest thing. And there were a bunch of us that knew it, but like when you were sitting in a sales meeting, they're like, well, why can't you just do this? Because you can't. You can't just call up and get a sale. It doesn't work that way. There's a process, and if it's over a certain dollar threshold, it's got to go through this cycle and things like that. I think for people that don't understand the market, diving in it, understanding that the learning curve is probably going to be pretty steep. Now, there are other people. So like I have another client who actually kind of similar to what you were talking about earlier. It was like a $500K deal. And this is something he's like, dude, I got equity. I can just pull and do this thing and buy this transaction. But that person had been in the business for years. And I actually have 4 different clients that I could talk about that are in that similar dollar value, $500,000 to $1 million, where they had been in the business. They'd been a government contractor. They'd been in the business development side. They knew, hey, this is not going to be easy. It's going to take me a year to transition the owners out, and to take over the accounts, to build relationships with their teaming partners. Because even if the owner's not the face of the company, they've built a relationship with all of those people. That's not always a very quick thing, and nothing in government moves fast, right? And what I found, what's really interesting, is government contractors often adopt the speed of the government, which is super slow. And so now you've got people that think, oh, it's normal to have a sales call today and then not touch base with you for 3 months. That's normal. Like, no, that's not normal. That's not how business normally works. But they're used to working at that speed because they've been in the government for a really long time. And so having to get them up to speed on, no, you can't just have 12 people on your roster that you're trying to reach out to. You've got to actually build a pipeline and do all this stuff. And oh, by the way, it's competitive in different ways and things like that. So there's some interesting components of that. And then looking at like, what are they going to lose by buying the company? We've had woman-owned businesses or 8A businesses where the new owner's not going to qualify for that status. So the company is immediately going to lose that status and not be allowed to recompete on those types of contracts. So they're going to have to build something differently or put a different owner in or whatever. Most people think it's just a transaction. Well, I'm just going to buy this and I'm going to buy those contracts. Well, it's not that simple. And the final part that most people don't realize is if you come in and buy a business, then the government has to novate those contracts. Like that's something most people don't know. Like you got to go to the government, every agency, and say, hey, Susan just bought the company, or this company just bought the company. It's usually in that situation where you've got another company acquiring the company. And so in that acquisition, they've got to go in there and say, hey, Department of Defense, is it okay that this contract moves over here? The government has a year to say no to that.
Oh my gosh.
Every year. So it could take significant time. Now, does the government say no? Most of the time they don't, unless there's just something really sketchy going on, or they're like, hey, why is this being owned by this foreign entity, or, right? Something weird, right? That's when they raise red flags. But for the most part, it's going to transition smoothly on the government side. It's just making sure you're really squared away in understanding the market. That's the biggest thing I see. So
yeah, and you could get creative. Sorry to interrupt. In that purchase agreement, obviously, and you probably already know this, because you don't want to wait a year to close, right?
Right.
And the buyer needs it before they close, right? Because they're worried.
Yeah.
But you can write it in the purchase agreement that, like, if for some reason the government doesn't approve, or you can do an earn out leading on part of the purchase price if they do, or throw it in an escrow account just to make sure. So there's like hacks around it.
As we close up here, what are some trends or predictions that you may have for kind of the future of M&A, the next 5-10 years, whatever it may be, where I'm thinking of, like, if I'm in the position where I'm thinking about selling my business right now, is this going to cool off in 12 months? Is it going to pick up in 12 months? Do you think it's going to stay the same, or any other predictions you may have, whether it is something from a regulation perspective or something you see coming down? What are your thoughts on the future of M&A?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the election. I actually talked to an investment banker who's been doing it forever, 30 years, massive deals he does, M&A and investment banking. And yeah, he thinks it'll actually pick up a little bit this summer right before the election. Because again, there's this shakiness, this uncertainty. So PE might pick back up a little bit this summer. And then depending on who's going to get in office, if there's a certain person that gets in the office, can pick back up or do even better. I wish I had a crystal ball, because we talk to sellers that are like, the exit price isn't there right now, right? Even though it's a seller's market, there's a certain dollar amount they want, like a 7 or an 8 figure. They want that badge of honor, right? An 8 figure exit, and they're not there yet. So we have to reverse engineer it and then say, so they need to make the decision right now that, God forbid, they bust their butt, the next, 12 months, and then the economy's down, and now you just worked super hard and now your price went down. You should just sold right now. Again, I wish I had a crystal ball. I have no idea. So I kind of give that disclosure. And I know I'm biased, so it's tricky. I'm like, I'm just going to let you know this. I'm not trying to pressure you to sell right now, but this is the market right now. And God forbid that happens. Because if the economy comes down, there's going to be issues for the sellers. Yeah, these buyers are buying. It's crazy. Sellers didn't want to sell the last 2 months. It was weird. January, February. For the life of us, we've talked to tons of sellers. They weren't ready. They're going to wait for whatever reasons. And then all of a sudden right now, we've landed like back to back to back, like 3 clients, maybe 4, which is a lot, within a week period, right? I'm going to do some math on how many we landed last year. I think sellers are right. And these buyers were waiting. I have 2 to 5 offers on every single listing I've had for the last 6 months. So it's like, that's why we need more sellers, because the buyers that lost out on the bids, they're like ready, like they have capital. They're waiting. These listings, the 2 we just launched last week, have gone bananas. Kind of like you said earlier, it's like, did we price it too low because we got so many inquiries? So that starts, but then we'll have multiple bids. The price is going to start going up, right? There's going to be a bidding war. But I wasn't we priced it high to begin with. And so, yeah, these buyers, they're buying. So it's not on the buyer side. It's the sellers that are kind of waiting it out.
That's very interesting. It's so hard to predict what's going to go on, but I do know there is a generation that's looking to exit and do some retirement. There's some people that are exiting corporate jobs that are looking for a little something in their retirement. It's a very interesting time that I've never seen in my lifetime. So I think the next 20, 30 years are going to be kind of wild in this whole arena. If I had to have a crystal ball, just because of just the shuffling and jockeying of people in and out of the market, and maybe even back into the market where, hey, I'm used to a certain lifestyle and I'm gonna go retire. And after a year or two of that, it's like, hey, I kind of miss the cash flow I had and want to increase that. Or maybe we didn't put away for retirement like we thought, or I'm bored and want to get back in the game. And I think entrepreneurs definitely have that bug. I know several people that did the whole I'm retiring early thing. And when I say early, it's younger than 50. Mm-hmm. So whether it's in their 30s or 40s or early 50, that did that for a couple of years and are like, I'm bored out of my mind. I got to find something to do. And they're starting new corporations, or they're trying to buy something and get in, or even if it's a small equity stake in something so they can have something to just sell. I think it's going to be interesting. Thanks for coming on, talking about all this. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to talking to you again. I really hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe to the podcast and screenshot it and tag me on LinkedIn or whatever social media you use. So thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.